This is the first PowerPoint presentation for Week 3 of World Geography, and it covers the Caribbean. The next two slides note learning objectives for this chapter in the textbook. I have especially highlighted to differentiate between island and rimland
Here are
environments,
key concepts or terms
and the environmental issues that affect these areas.
chapter.
And on the next slide,
especially
I've
rimland,
highlighted greater and lesser Antilles,
between social and economic
development, and suggest
Monroe
reasons why the
Doctrine,
Caribbean does better in social indicators of development compared to
and
economic
offshore
indicators.
banking.
The Caribbean was extensively explored early on by Europeans during the Age of Discovery. But this slide notes also, though, as the book says, its modern regional identity is unclear, often merged with Latin America, but also viewed as apart from it. Here is the map from page 195 in your textbook, and it helps us see, in general, the Caribbean region. Famous are the islands, and you have the Greater Antilles Islands. There's 4 of them: Cuba and Jamaica, Hispaniola, which is divided between Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico, which is a commonwealth of the United States. Extending beyond these 4 larger islands to the east is the Lesser Antilles. And you see the detail given on the map as well of this set of islands, this arc of islands. Note that they seem to follow, in a sense, the broken red line that lies to the east of them. And that's where the plates meet each other. And so there is some plate action involved here. A very famous earthquake happened recently in 2010 when Haiti suffered a massive earthquake that left 200,000 people dead. However, your book notes that this area is not strongly geologically active, but in fact the fault that shifted to cause the Haiti earthquake had really been inactive for quite a while. So the islands form the Antilles, both the greater and the lesser. But note also, far to the west, just south of Mexico, is Belize, and it's connected with the Caribbean group here, as are the 3 nations far to the east on the South American continent, Guyana, Suriname, and French Guiana. Both Belize and the countries on the South American continent are still forested. Now, the countries on the mainlands, Belize and the 3 nations on the South American continent, those are referred to as the rimland of the Caribbean region. The Greater Antilles, the 4 larger islands, have the bulk of the region's population. I have included on this slide a link to a site that gives a very brief summary of each of the islands. Here is the map from page 200 in your textbook. You'll note that this is a tropical environment with the eastern, northeastern parts of the larger regions tending to be the wetter part of the territory. Because of their location and the typical movement of the winds, the Caribbean is subject to hurricanes. Hurricanes begin all the way over towards the west coast of Africa, but then move to the west, and often the Caribbean region will be subject to hurricane activity. Though the Caribbean region contributes very little to greenhouse gas climate change, it's vulnerable to the results of building greenhouse gases. Global warming and its melting of the polar ice causes the sea level to rise, and if this continues, then it will be a problem for a number of places in the region. This slide also lists other problems associated with climate change, problems for the Caribbean region. One of the major issues facing areas of the Caribbean is deforestation, including in Belize, in the Guyana region, and Haiti, as this map notes. Urbanization is a problem around the world. It's a global issue, and nations in the Caribbean are having to deal with it as well. One of the major concerns is water quality. 80% of Dominicans and Jamaicans have access to good water situations, but only 17% of Haitians do. Even though the Dominican Republic and Haiti occupy the same island, Haiti is notably poor. Urbanization is a complex and significant concern around the world. It is a global issue, and the Caribbean nations are having to deal with urbanization. Water and sanitation are two important aspects of the urban environment, and showing just how difficult it is in Haiti. While 80% of Dominicans and Jamaicans have improved sanitation, only 17% of Haitians do. Though Haiti and the Dominican Republic inhabit the same island, Haiti is very poor. This is the map from page 206 in your textbook. The Greater Antilles, as was noted before, have the larger populations, while the rimland states, those mainland countries, the four of them, are less densely populated. In fact, 85% of the Caribbean's population is located on the four islands of the Greater Antilles. The fertility rate in the Caribbean region has been declining in recent years, and the people are living longer lives. As your book notes on page 208, quote, "In general, educational improvements, urbanization, and a preference for smaller families have contributed to slower growth rates." And we note the importance of education and its impact on population. Now, for this table, I have given on the left the rate of natural increase for the globe, which is 1.2 per year, and you can compare the Caribbean nations with that, and then the total fertility rate, keeping in mind that less than 2.1 means there's no natural population growth going on. The Caribbean region is also dealing with AIDS and HIV, But the book notes that a lot has gone on to bring this problem under control and to help prevent the spread of the disease. Part of the historical legacy of the Caribbean is slavery. The native peoples of the islands were very quickly wiped out by disease, and peoples from Africa were brought over to under the force of slavery to do the work. Slavery is probably the number one issue in American history. When I say American, I mean the United States. But looking at this map, it can be seen that the overwhelming majority of enslaved African peoples were taken to Brazil and other parts of South America, and then to the Caribbean. As the native peoples of the region died out due to disease, a Neo-Africa was or emerges in this region. Certain islands afforded slaves to escape to a region that might be out of the reach of the landowners. And in various places, these maroon societies developed, preserving a number of West African cultural traditions. The islands of the Caribbean have been associated with various European powers, as this map notes, and some have
Finally,
seen
there is the most famous
governing
policy of
authority
Monroe's administration,
change from
Monroe Doctrine,
one
which
colonial
resulted
power
largely
to
out of
another.
precaution, somewhat out
The
of
next
a desire
slide
to end
notes
colonization
the
by
U.S.
European powers
presence
in
and
North and South America.
neo-colonial
By
influence in the area.
1823, after Napoleon had once occupied
The
Spain
Monroe
and
Doctrine,
Portugal,
issued by
Spain
President
had lost
Monroe
most of its powers in Latin
and
America.
drawn up by
And
John
the Spanish
Quincy
Empire,
Adams,
as it was in the 17th and 18th centuries,
basically
was
told
gone.
Europe
There were
that
many independence movements.
the United States would not tolerate
Simon Bolivar
any
comes to mind. By 1823, however,
exertion
Monroe caught hold of rumors
of
that France wanted to restore a
power and influence
Spanish-American empire.
in the U.S.'s.
Both Monroe and Calhoun were concerned with such a prospect and initially agreed to ally with the British when their foreign minister, George Canning, introduced the idea that the two governments jointly oppose such an action. But John Quincy Adams, however, urged Monroe to move unilaterally, that is, without Britain, the U.S. to go alone in its policy, which Monroe did by issuing the Monroe Doctrine. Written chiefly by John Quincy Adams, Monroe incorporated the basic ideas of the Monroe Doctrine into his annual message to Congress in 1823, stating the American continents are henceforth not to be considered as subjects for further colonization by any European power. The United States would consider any attempt on Europe's part to extend their system to any portion of this hemisphere as dangerous. The U.S., in return, would not interfere with existing European colonies. The U.S. would keep out of international affairs.
While the Caribbean suffers from some economic stagnation, it has made significant improvement in social development. The textbook notes that the, quote, Caribbean nations fare well in the Human Development Index, and I wanted to give you a link here to the most recent rankings on the Human Development Index, which takes into account things like education and life expectancy. It should be noted, though, that Haiti is a nation that is suffering from a low ranking on the Human Development Index. The Cayman Islands are especially known for offshore banking and places for the super wealthy to put money. As your book notes, the Cayman Islands are the 5th largest banking center in the world after New York, London, Hong Kong, and Tokyo. As was noted before, the region enjoys a generally strong social development. One interesting aspect of social development in the Caribbean is that there's a brain gain going on where people are returning with their highly developed skills and money.